who has been playing in 13.1 and playing against some of these champions? Because I know everyone has, right? These champions, guys, in this video, these 10 champs are the champs that are most likely going to get nerfed for 13.2. So they are the most banned champions, and this is in Challenger. Now, for those of you who don't know, Challenger Elo is pretty much what decides the meta, right? Because these picks will be picked and banned in pro play and are just the most viable picks in their respective roles. So if these are picked and banned in Challenger pretty much every single game, they are more than likely going to be looked at from the balance team in terms of nerfing or just fine-tuning. Now, they might not be as OP in lower elos or the majority of elos, but they are just innately speaking the strongest picks. So in this video, if you do actually want to master any of these picks, again, our website is at your disposal. In the description comment section, our Challenger players and coaches are uploading daily videos for our thousands of subscribers. So if you guys get signed up, guaranteed improvement, legit. If you don't improve even just from watching one of my high elo VOD analyses, I'll give you like a free session, legit. Probably not, don't hold me to that. But yes, the website is there, our library of resources, so get signed up to get that exclusive access to our content. And yes, let's get into the top 10 most banned champions for 13.1. So we're going to start by talking about a champion in the bot lane. This is Heimerdinger. Now in Challenger Elo, he is banned in over 26% of games, and you can see that the Donger is still picked in over 1200 matches. And with all these stats, you can see that the Donger is an S+ tier champion in this Elo with over a 51% win rate. Now this pick really became popular from Beryl, the dude who won Worlds by the way, as a support, because there are very few counter picks to this, and most of the time people don't play them. So if we're talking like Syndra support, Jhin support, maybe some sort of big range champion like Xerath or Lux might do well, but the big point here is that Heimerdinger's priority in the early game is just unstoppable pretty much. But here's a tip, guys. If you are playing as Heimerdinger, start with a sweeper and run to the bottom brush as soon as possible. If you get set up, there is going to be no stopping you, no stopping your pushing power. If you're against the Donger, you do exactly the same thing. Have a red sweeper, run to the bottom brushes, and do not allow this guy to set up. It will be a massive cuck. But yes, he's banned in over 26% of games, and for Heimerdinger players who want to play him maybe in the mid lane or the top lane, it does mean that these players, yes, they just can't pick him as much. So I'm guessing he might actually get hit in 13.2. Now moving on to one of the most oppressive champs in the game despite getting, well, some big nerfs in 13.1, this is Kassadin in the top lane. Now this dude, even though he got nerfed kind of big time, right, the movement speed got nerfed, his W got nerfed, but this champion is still absolutely thriving in pretty much every single elo. Now he's got a very similar ban rate to the Donger, 26.6%, so 1 in every 4 matches he's banned, but he's picked in over 13% and to still have at least a 50.5% win rate classifies this guy as an S+ tier top laner. He's also very blind pickable, but he does have a couple of very hard counters, so whether it's like Olaf, GP should be able to beat him, you just have to be a little bit careful of him dashing in and doing something to you. Jace probably does very well as well, right? So there are a couple of picks that do well, but generally speaking, this guy, if he isn't in your champion pool, you obviously have not been playing late, and I'm guessing he's going to get nerfed again in 13.2. Now moving back down to the bot lane here, the second of 3 supports getting nerfed, and I reckon you can probably guess who this one might be. She got nerfed in 13.1. In terms of her Q's damage, both forms of it, this is Yuumi. She's still banned in over 28% of games, and look at the win rate, it's 44.4%. Now honestly, I don't know like if Riot can actually nerf this champion anymore. I mean, they could do, because even at the moment, right, like in LPL it started, Yuumi is legit pick and ban. Like if she's open, you first pick, or she's being banned. Because Zeri is very good, maybe you can pick Sivir again, right? Yuumi just still has so much power in this game, and honestly I think the only way to resolve this is by deleting her. But of course Riot won't do that because there's so many Yuumi players out there, and yeah, I'm guessing the skins do well as well, so there's no way they're going to actually get rid of her, but I can probably still see some nerfs coming in for 13.2. Because once again, if she is getting banned so much because she is just, yeah, an obnoxious champion by default, it really does hurt Yuumi mains because you can't play her as much as you want to. So yeah, maybe the balance team have their eyes on Yuumi as well. Now moving into the mid lane or jungle here, but we'll talk about mid lane Sylas for a second. In over 1,000 matches, he's banned almost 30% of the time. Now this is obviously a big amount, and he's picked over 8% of the time. Now in jungle it's kind of similar, exactly the same ban rate of course, but he is picked actually 12% of the time. So a little more popular in terms of the jungle. And this champion to be banned this much in high reloads, honestly I don't actually think he'll get nerfed. The reason being because he's probably banned because he's a flex pick, right? Like he just does so well into so many team compositions, especially in solo queue when you just pick for yourself, right? Not really thinking, oh they could pick Sylas here after I pick a Mumu, or after I pick Hecarim, right? So in solo queue, because he can be picked in so many roles, mid lane, jungle, even in the top lane, if you're against stuff like Shen, you can have a good ultimate like Malphite. These type of champions, for sure, Sylas can be picked, but I think that's kind of like the real reason why he is picked. So I don't really expect any nerfs to Sylas like the other champions we've talked about. So he is the next on the countdown. Now moving on to number 6 on this countdown, the last of the 3 supports, this is Nami. Now why is Nami banned so much? 30% of games in Challenger Elo and picked in over 20%. This is the highest pick rate out of anyone on this list, and look at the win rate for me, 53.14%. That's in close to 2,500 matches in the hardest elo in the world. Now, if you're not playing Nami with Lucian, you might think like, well, isn't it just troll to pick this champion? Like that's what you're really picking up for, but not all of these 2,500 games or close to are going to be with a Lucian. So why is she so good? Well, really nothing has really changed for Nami in terms of getting buffed or getting nerfed. She's just innately broken. The amount of damage your teammates can deal with your W and then your E when you start getting cooldown right, you're healing so many people, and of course with your Q and ultimate, so deadly in team fights, and they're also really good for gank setup. It's very difficult to actually beat a Nami player who's switched on. Also because you're an enchanter, you scale so well. So even if you do run it down during the laning phase, and I'd highly recommend taking bone plating as your secondary tree if you're into something like a Blitzcrank, Leona, something like this. So that's one thing to think about. But yeah, 30% ban rate, picked in over 20% of games. These are some of the most ridiculous stats I've ever seen. So Nami number 6. Now moving on to the top 5. Here we go. Moving into the jungle here and talking about Rengar, who has a ban rate of 33.6% in Challenger. And you can see that this guy in terms of pick rate, 5% isn't really that high, but he still has over 600 matches under his belt on 13.1 and close to a 53% win rate. Now it's not as broken as Nami's win rate perhaps, but still Rengar in the jungle and S plus tier champion in this elo. I don't think he'll get nerfed because in lower elos this dude doesn't have like the best win rates, and he is actually like kind of difficult to play in terms of knowing how your empowered abilities work, also stacking your abilities right so you come out of the jungle as strong as possible. Of course when you pop your ultimate, that's really what you want. So Rengar in the jungle, yes, he requires some sort of like, you know, mechanics and knowledge of the champion for sure, but when you do actually do that, he is obviously one of the top tier champions in the game. But yeah, I don't think the balance team will nerf him, a bit like Sylas. Now moving on to the top 4. These 4 champions, guys, honestly they could easily get nerfed in 13.2. So the first of these is Kindred in the jungle. So it's almost a bit like Rengar, right? You do need some specific knowledge and mastery on this champion as far as like how our marks go, where they spawn on the map, and also in terms of actually kiting, right? Like spacing honestly is the hardest mechanic to master in the game. Like being able to deal damage while taking none at range, very difficult, right? To dodge skill shots, to dodge damage, and all the important CC, that is difficult. But as far as this champion actually goes, because you have decent clear speed, especially once you start scaling into a game, getting Noon Quiver, then Kraken Slayer, you legit one-shot camps, but you also one-shot people. The damage you deal, especially with your W attached to someone, it is nuts. And in over 1,500 games, Kindred players have over a 53.5% win rate, and look at the ban rate for me, it's almost 34%. When you get a lead on this champion in the early game, there is no stopping you. Probably the best snowballer there will ever be, honestly. So I can definitely see this champion getting nerfed. But again, the issue is here, like if you justify that, well, it's hard to because in lower elos, she doesn't really do that well. And in pro play at the moment, she doesn't really get picked unless it's for a very specific team composition. But Kindred is number 4 on the countdown. Now moving into the top 3, we're heading to the top lane. So we talked about Kassadin, the other top laner. Well, she also got nerfed in 13.1. This is Fiora. Now Fiora, look at the ban rate for me. This is close to 40%, and this is after she got nerfed. So even though Riot nerfed your Q's damage and they also nerfed your passive damage, guess what? You're still running Grass the Undying, getting a Sheen into Divine Sundra. That's what makes her broken. Oh, please, right, just do something about her like laning phase and early game. It's too difficult to actually beat. Unless you're like a one-trick, I don't know, like Quinn or Cannon player, but who really does that? This champion is just unbeatable, but you might be like, well, she has a 48.5% win rate and is D tier. Well, that doesn't take away from the fact that she's banned in almost 40% of games. Yes, you might not win every single game on Fiora, especially when team fights come around. You're not the most amazing team fighter, but in the 1v1, in the top lane, in the split push, there are very few, if any, champions better, and that's why she has this ban rate. So again, if you are like a Fiora main, particularly in lower elos, you really just can't pick her that much at the moment. Now speaking of a champion who you probably can't pick that much, but honestly I think this champion will probably be banned, like regardless if he gets nerfed or not, like as much as he is, this being Draven, who is the most banned AD carry in Challenger at 40%. You might have thought Samira was here, Lucian is actually very close, he's around 20% ban rate, but Draven is double any of the other AD carries. The reason being is because a one-trick Draven player is one of the deadliest players and champion combinations, and because, well, in the bot lane at the moment, there aren't many champions who beat Draven. We might be thinking about like a Samira, right? Because you can stop his axes. Maybe there are a couple of other champions, like ranged champions, like maybe Caitlyn does well, right? But for the most part, everyone is just scared about playing against a very good Draven player because, again, they're just very difficult to beat. Unless you have a support who can actually lock him down and maybe a team composition who can lock him down, the Draven is going to be a force in pretty much every single game. And a bit like Fiora, even though his win rate isn't good and he's classified as a D tier champion, you guys get my drift, right? If you've played against a good Draven, you know how that bot lane feels. Now, the most banned champion on the Rift, guys. How many people thought it would have been Jax in higher relos? Well, it's not, and it's kind of surprising because Jax is giga broken right now. The actual most banned champion, and honestly, this shouldn't surprise you, this is Kassadin. 56%. That is massive. In over 1,000 games, this guy has over a 52% win rate. S+ tier champion. Do I really need to explain why? The buffs to Roa, to Sylas this patch have made him even better. The buffs a few patches ago, and now the fact that you're actually starting with your E and maxing this first, the damage you deal, and yeah, it's Kassadin. Ultimate solo queue champion, right? Most people as well, especially in lower elos, don't know how to actually lane, like, properly against Kassadins anyway, or melee champions. So you get out of the laning phase, free of charge, equals CS, and you're chilling. You're gonna 1v9, especially if you can get to level 16. So guys, those were the 10 most banned champions in Challenger for 13.1, and I'd expect to see some, maybe most of these nerfed in the next patch, but for now, abuse these while you can. Inflate your reload. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you did enjoy it, leave a like down below, and of course, if you have any questions, any thoughts, leave them in the comment section, and until our next Season 13 upload, this has been Peace.